Hey, welcome back! Today we'll be having a look at the relatively new HTML dialog element. The dialog element is an element for you to create modals with, of course, and browser support is actually really great at the moment. And it also brings a lot of accessibility benefits. And what I created today to demonstrate this dialog is a basic payment page, or a part of it, where you see the plan you're subscribed to as well as your payment details. Then there's a button, and if you click it, it shows a dialog. And that dialog, it's animated, it has automatically focus trapping, which is super important for accessibility. So that means that I can move my tab and it will stay within the modal. It has the escape, so if you click it, it will close the modal without me writing any JavaScript for it. And when you can see, when I click escape, the focus moves back to this button. And again, something that's super important for accessibility and something that took me a few years back a lot of time to write myself. But now all of this are things you get out of the box with this dialog element. So I am super excited about this element and I want to teach you about it today because I think you have to start using it right now. So let's not wait any longer and let me show you how easy it is to add this element. So the starting point we have today is this page that already has both the top block with the button that should trigger the dialog, as well as the contents of the dialog. So the only thing we need to do now is, instead of having the dialog always visible, make that thing pop up and disappear. And really, with the dialog element, that's so simple to do. If we look at the code, this top part is the dark gray background that shows the current payment plan, and the div right underneath it with the form inside, all of that is the modal contents. In order to now convert this into a dialog, we're gonna change this div into the new element called dialog. And as soon as we do that, we notice that the dialog disappeared. And that is because by default, if you use a dialog, it will be hidden. There's no styles you need to add for this, it's all based on the browser's defaults. So if we open up our inspector and we go into our dialog element, we see that the element is there. When I hover it, it's not visible because it's again not on the page. However, we can add another open attribute, and when I do that, the dialog suddenly comes back. It's still not really a dialog, but it shows up. And that is all because the browser applies default styles to this. We do, however, want to open this with a button click and not by setting an attribute in the inspector, of course. So for that, we actually need to target this ref because there's a JavaScript method on here that we can run. So that means that first we need to create a new ref. We call dialog ref. That's a use ref that starts as null. And for TypeScript, it takes in an HTML dialog element. Then we're gonna set this ref on the dialog. And once we do that, we can run an on-click on our button that says dialog ref.current.show. And I'm using the optional chaining here because current could be undefined. So another option could be to check if dialog.current and then dialog.current.show. But using optional chaining here, the question mark with the dot notation, also prevents it from executing the function if it doesn't exist. Now we've added this on-click handler, we can click this button, and again, it will show the dialog in place. But still, that's not what we want, right? We want a dialog. So there's two methods you can use. The first one is show, and the second one is show modal. And if we quickly refresh and we then click the button again, it shows a dialog. And if you look at the background, it will even add a little bit of backdrop as well. So it really stands out from the rest of the page. And all of that you get for free by your browser. And it actually gets even better because with this one line, we got so much stuff for free. Because if I open this modal again, you see there's a focus outline on this button, this close button. The dialog automatically focuses the first focusable element. And that's something that's really important for accessibility. Because if you don't do that, a user that uses a screen reader will be lost because they don't know what suddenly happened if we don't move the focus for them. But another thing that's also super important is that if they escape out of it, the element they were on before they went into the modal also gets focus again. And that's again something that this dialog automatically does for us. I mean, back in the day, I had to write all of this with JavaScript simply to make my website accessible. And now we get all of this for free. And also, I pressed escape and it closes, but I didn't write anything for it. All of this again, all for free. And the final nice thing this also adds is called focus trapping. So that means if I keep on moving my tab, it will stay within the modal and it won't focus anything that is actually in the background. Again, something that's super important for screen readers, so they know where they are within a page and they don't get lost by suddenly starting to read out your main navigation again while they're actually in this modal. And again, I literally only added this on click and changed this to a modal element, and we get all of that for free. And that's really, really awesome. So what we also get for free is a little bit of styles. And you see, for example, that it added a padding around here, which is something we don't want. However, we can of course just add a padding 0 and, for example, also a width of 50% or maybe 66% to just change the width of the dialog. All of that, of course, can simply be overwritten with CSS. And next to the dialog itself, we're even able to style the backdrop. And with Tailwind, that's actually rather simple, because we do get a backdrop prefix. Or we could, for example, say backdrop blur medium. And what you already see is that the background gets blurred whenever the modal is open. Maybe it's a little bit too heavy, so let's make it small. And that's the only thing we need to do to change this backdrop. And if we quickly inspect our modal, we see that the dialog element is rendered, but there is also a backdrop pseudo element. And that is actually what's being styled by Tailwind right now. You can simply target this with plain CSS as well, and then just add any styles on here that you want. But the positioning in the background and full width and height, that's all done by a browser again, and something you don't have to worry about. Next is also making this close button work. Because if you look at the top of my browser and I click this button, you saw that line appear. And that's actually Arc showing you that the browser is loading a page. And it is loading a page because it is within a form. And by default, a button in a form will be of type submit. So it's actually submitting this form. We can prevent that by adding a type as button, because a button type will not submit a form. And if I then click, nothing happens anymore. The modal isn't closed. But we can simply add that closing behavior by copying this on click here, adding it to our button, and then make it call the close function. And if we then click this button again, the modal is closed. Awesome. Again, only a one-line change. And with that, the browser again moves focus back to the button. Everything just happens automatically without us needing to think about it at all. But now we still have this form in here. And I actually did add this on purpose, because if you're not adding a form in this modal, you might be done. We'll be adding an animation at the end still, but that's then the only thing you still need to do. But if there's a form, there's actually a new method we can use right now to also not submit the form and do a full page refresh, but actually send the data back to the dialog element. So for that, we can use method is dialog. Or the other option would be, instead of adding method dialog to your form, going to your submit buttons and add a form method attribute to your button that also has the value of dialog. Either of the two options will work, both as well, but that's kind of unnecessary. But the result will be that your form won't submit and do a full page refresh, not a post or a get, but it will simply store its current state and send the data to the dialog element. And what it also does is it automatically closes the dialog for you. So if I now click this save button, it closes the dialog. That's also included because we are using the form method dialog or the method dialog on the form. So that means that when we submit this form now, we simply get all of the form data within a submit event. So we could add an onSubmit to our dialog, and that gives us the event, of course. We could say const form data equals new form data equals new form data of event.target. And we need to tell TypeScript that this is a HTML form element. And then we could, for example, say console.log form data.get card number. And if I then enter a card number here, and we go to our console and save, we see that we get the values from the form, and we can use them to do anything. And again, all of that for free, including the closing of the modal and removing back the focus. One other thing though that you also get on this dialog is an onClose function. And that onClose function again gets in an event where this time our const target is event.target as HTML dialog element. Then we can simply console.log target.return value. And what is in the return value is actually the value of the button you clicked. So in this case, all of the buttons that have a formatted dialog and a value will simply trigger this onClose and the onSubmit, but it will then tell you what type of button you clicked because of the value the button has. So again, if we click this and click cancel, we see that we get cancel. If I click save, we get submit. But also in both of the cases, we get the value of the form. So you need to be able to know what button is clicked, and for that you can use this value attribute. And then finally, there's two things that I still want to add. The first one is as soon as you open a dialog, you cannot click the backdrop, or at least you can click it, but it doesn't do anything. And depending on what you want, you could want the modal to close when you click on this backdrop. So for that, again, we can use a little bit of JavaScript to enhance the default behavior, and we can use an onClick handler for that. First, we copy this target again, because then we also have the TypeScript definitions. And then we could say if target.nodeName equals dialog, then we can simply run target.close. Or we could also use the dialog ref if that's what you want, but in this case, because we check that our node name, the target, is the dialog itself, we can run target.close and it will automatically run the close method on the dialog. And the reason this check works is because if you click on a child node of the dialog, the node name will be div, span, button, anything else, but it won't be dialog. So if you click on dialog, we know for sure that you clicked on the dialog element itself. And the backdrop is included in the dialog element because it's a pseudo element. And the reason clicking on the white background of the modal is not closing the dialog is because all of these three children, both the header, the children, as well as the footer, are both elements that fill up the whole width and height of the dialog. If this white background would be your dialog background, then it would actually close the dialog as well. So in that case, you really need to have children elements that span the whole width and height of your dialog. So that way, when you click the dialog, you know the only way to click the dialog is by clicking the backdrop. And that then closes the element again. Now, there's one final thing missing, and that of course makes your front end pop again, and that's some really basic animations. Like I showed at the beginning of this video, as soon as you click the dialog, there is an open attribute that's actually automatically added by the browser. And this open attribute is what we can use to style our animations with. However, there's one thing we need to do before we can really animate this. Because when you close the modal, the default CSS that gets added is simply display none. And animating something from display none to display block and also do a transition is something that's not possible. So that means that we actually should always make this dialog display block. But if we make it display block, we see that it's always visible. And that's of course not something we want. So that means that we also should add opacity 0 and also add pointer events none. because otherwise you could still interact with it. And next to an opacity animation, I actually also want to animate it up slightly. So I'm also by default gonna add a translate Y of 20, for example. And then I'm also gonna add a transition to this. Transition, and then both opacity as well as transform. And I'm gonna make the duration 300 milliseconds. Let's add some new lines for now to make it a bit more readable. And now the only thing left to make this animation work is set the opacity to 1 and remove the translate Y when the open attribute is set. So we can target the open attribute by using square brackets and then another square bracket, because these square brackets also in CSS target an element with a specific attribute, in our case open, and these outer square brackets are used for Tailwind to create custom classes that don't exist in Tailwind. And the ampersand then targets the current element. So if we add this and then colon opacity 100, and we do exactly the same thing for translate Y, 0, and we then click this element, we see that we already have the fade in animation. There is something weird happening though, and that is you see it jump as soon as I close the animation. And that is because by default, the modal, when it's out of view, is not placed in the center of the screen. So we can fix that by simply always adding inset 0, which adds top left and bottom right of 0. And if we do that, we see that it always animates from the center, and it simply animates in and out. And with that, we also have added an animation to our dialog. And still, there's not that much that we had to add. All of this is what we're getting for free by the browser. And yes, maybe I'm that old, but I really remember the time when we had to set all of these things ourselves. Moving the focus around, setting the focus traps so you can't tap out of the dialog again, and a lot of developers simply don't have the time to spend this much effort in details of their applications. So it's really good that we get all of this for free now, because that way visually impaired users can use your website a lot better. So definitely start using the dialog element, because all of this again is something you get for free. And it's so important to also make the web more accessible to everyone. So elements like this really help with it. I really hope you enjoyed this video and that you saw how easy it is to really use this element and enhance your website in general. If you're struggling with building something like this, definitely join my Discord for a very small fee, where I'm able to help you and also explain things more in depth to you if there's any questions you have. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.